This short documentary series on the humanities in Europe today, which starts from Europe but will expand to cover, I hope, the whole world, is the initiative of the European network of humanities centers and institutes. We decided collectively with our colleagues that it would be a good idea to present a series of portraits of leading figures in the humanities in our part of the world, and to use them as sources of inspirations, as role models, if you wish, for practitioners and students alike. The portraits of these very sort of charismatic, highly accomplished, distinguished professionals accomplishes another aim. It allows us to trace a genealogical sort of portrait of where the humanities have been, where they are at today, and where they could go, insofar as each person that we interview is asked to trace their own itinerary, past, present, and future. And simply by asking a question like, what was your faculty called when you studied as an undergraduate? And noticing the semantic, the institutional, the political transformations that the field has gone through. Just by doing that, I think the viewers should be in a position to measure the extent of the changes and the extent of the vitality of the field. The hope of this mini-series is indeed that we can collectively, as practitioners but also as spectators, express our love for, our trust in, our respect for this amazing field of the humanities at a time in its history when it is coming under attack in the press, in the public debate, in policy making and financial decisions that are really penalizing this field. The humanities in the 21st century, as you will see in the different portraits of these great figures we're offering to you, are a vital, vibrant, critical, creative, extremely accountable field, proud of its history, confident of its place in the world, and very hopeful for the future. We really hope that you will enjoy watching these great figures, and maybe you will be yourself tempted to run out and interview somebody that you know in your own neighborhood, in your own circles, because the humanities are everywhere and for everybody.
If you ask me what role did the humanities play, well, they were all over the place, because my father was, he was trained in theology, in philosophy, pedagogy, so that was just the swimming pool in which I had my youth, being the son of a married priest. It was all there. I think it gave me some kind of a basic openness, but also a healthy distance. Because of course, if you're married and still a priest, then you have an affinity, but you also left. So I think the atmosphere that I got there was an openness for religion, experiences, but not a dogmatic idea of how things should be. Actually, my interest was much more in the sciences and in technology, also as a child already. So when I was a teenager, it was really hard for me to make a decision what to do. And I still recall very well one moment, that was, I think I was 15 or 16 years old, and I read in the newspaper an article about a physicist, Ad Lagendijk, who had his inaugural speech in Amsterdam about the arrogance of physics, and how all kinds of physicists make claims about religion that they should not make. And then I thought, wow, this is interesting. This guy is in physics and he's also making a philosophical point. And I was also really fascinated by all the claims that physicists made. I thought, wow, maybe I should try to combine physics and philosophy somehow. And that's what, in the end, I have been doing. Studying first physics in combination then with philosophy. The program I did was called Philosophy of Science, Technology and Society. And it was at the faculty of, I think in that time it was called Philosophy and Social Sciences. But of course you combined it with the program in technology, so that was for my in technical physics. It was the name of the faculty there. There's only one department of philosophy at the University of Twente where I'm working. And of course, yeah, you have to find a place. In the old days, the name of the faculty was still also carrying the name of philosophy. That's not the case anymore. But I must also say at our university there's kind of a separation between education and research. So research is organized in institutes, an institute for nanotechnology, for information technology, biomedical technology, governance studies, and our research is actually embedded in those technical institutes. So also there the label of philosophy is not visible at all. We are though. I mean, I think that's one of the very interesting things of the place where I work in Twente, that the boundaries between disciplines are very soft. So there's a lot of cooperation between, for instance, mathematics and stem cell research and nanotechnology or something. And so also our group as philosophers can quite easily merge there, and a lot of the stuff that I'm doing really in close interaction with engineers there. I think the label as a philosopher fits me best. But at the same time, I have an ambivalent relation to institutional philosophy, because I think too often it's more some kind of a philosophology, you know, as Harry Mulisch always said. So it's only directed, or not only, some forms of it are only directed at itself, at its own history, etc. And I like to do what some people call a form of empirical philosophy or engaged philosophy. Start by looking carefully at things that are happening in the world and try to understand what that could imply for the ways in which we could understand that in the field of philosophy. So it's a special type of philosophy. Or maybe I see it more as that you can interact with those fields in order to get inspiration or to get in touch with what you are studying. So I think good philosophy is an engaged form of philosophy. So you have to engage deeply with the practices that you try to understand. And that can imply that you need some methodologies from the social sciences or even from the sciences and technology. I feel very much at home at the label empirical philosophy. Henri Moll has done so much nice work on that, and that has always been very inspiring for me. And also the work in actor network theory, but also a lot of work in post-phenomenology, which is mainly my home basis at the moment, where people try to use methods from the social sciences, but in a very mild way, because we do not claim to come up with positive knowledge about society or something, but mainly as a way to get in touch with the phenomena that we try to study. If I try to understand the impact of deep brain stimulation on the ways in which we should understand what it means to be human, then I need to study deep brain stimulation, and I need to go out to the operation room where it's implanted, and I need to speak to patients who have it, etc. Not to come up with a map of how that works, but to get in touch with the relevant categories and dimensions of such a technology. I think the most important thing is that the humanities start looking more carefully at the world and what they can study there, rather than only studying itself and its own history. Because there are so many themes going on at the moment. Technology's impact on what it means to be human, the environmental issues, terrorism, new forms of religion, extremism. There's so many things that we need to understand and that are part of what it means to be human, that are really a very good basis for starting to do research in the humanities. And I think if we could do that, if we could maybe join forces somehow and find common themes that are worth exploring from all the various subfields in the humanities, I think that would be very important. More important than finding some kind of a methodology. I think that obsession is really a social science obsession. I mean, that's what you see very often among social scientists. Any discussion you have after every paper is about methodology. How can you be sure that what you found is true? I think in humanities we are not so much concerned with finding positive facts, right? We try to develop interpretive frameworks, ways of understanding, and their value is not in the question if you can prove the truth of it, but if it works. Maybe it is even a kind of engineering. You help people to understand a phenomenon, and you see if it works in terms of the impact it can have in discussions in politics, etc. Too often the humanities feel forced to play the game of the sciences, of the positive sciences, which is not needed at all. But I think in order to discover that, you have to show something that's really good. I mean, a lot of good work is going on, so this is not a qualification about the very quality of the work being done, but more about the self-understanding of some scholars there. What I found really fascinating to discover in my field, in the philosophy of technology, is that working in an environment of engineers, of scientists, with their own scientific criteria and well, their ways to play the game, as it were. It has also been very inspiring for me. I mean, I've always felt that you cannot work with those criteria, with articles rather than books, etc. Being there has made clear for me that you can play the game on your own terms in that environment, because you can also have a book with a peer-reviewed press, and you can also just see it as an important ambition to have an international audience, to have a discussion at a larger scale than only your own little, tiny little country. So that atmosphere can also be very positive and help you to open your eyes and your minds to do more than that. So I think for us, it worked like it worked as a source of inspiration to be in an environment of scientists and engineers, rather than feeling humble and small and ignored. And we are kind of successful exactly because of our engagement with what they are doing. I mean, it's a whole, you could say, playground of examples there. There were so many fascinating things being developed at our university. Chips to determine the sex of your offspring, stem cells that can do all kinds of things, brain connected to a computer, electrodes that can somehow grow into nerve tissue. It's incredible. So if you look at it like that, then it's more an inspiration than a threat, actually. Disciplines are really bothering us sometimes. It's important maybe to have a community of people with whom you can do stuff together. I think that's how the disciplines came into being, right? But now sometimes they do the opposite, right? They lock you up in your own column, and that's terrible. And I think, well, maybe the infrastructure of the University of Twente accidentally was a good basis for our type of doing philosophy, because the disciplinary boundaries, as I said, are very low there. So people cooperate between a lot of disciplines. And that's a good infrastructure also for integrating philosophy or psychology or sociology in a design process, for instance. So yeah, I think this is the most important lesson, that we are not a discipline. The dream would really be to get rid of the faculties, just to have a university with research groups, teams, disciplines, if you like, if they are helped by calling it a discipline. Just one big field of groups, and there can be many forms of cooperation between them. There can be centers, ad hoc, temporary, etc. It's a bit like Wageningen University has it. And that's, I think, also a very good basis for doing interdisciplinary work. We now have it a bit at the institutes, but they are still limited to nanotechnology or biotechnology, etc. And I think a much better basis also for integrating education and types of research would be just to give up on the faculties.